Another thing that is also standing in the way is a discussion paper. There is a discussion paper that has been sitting around in government for at least a year now about the R18 issue, and it just hasn't been released. Where is it? Why has it taken a year? It's a paper. Put it on the internet, put it in the newspapers, do whatever, you know. It's not hard to get it out, so let's just get it out, shall we? Yeah, that's pretty much the bulk of what I have to say, but we have another speaker for you. Over here, we have Nick Suzor. He is the chairman of Electronic Frontiers Australia, and he would like to talk to you about a few things, so I'll hand the microphone over to him.
Thanks a lot, Ethan. Look, I won't take up too much of your time, but I'd like to make a couple of comments, I guess. I think that Ethan touched on something really important here, that we're at a real crossroads between the way that conservative politicians like activists view video games and interactive entertainment, and the way that we see how games can be in the future, how expressive they can be, how they can tell different stories, how they can tell adult stories. These are not the Pac-Man and Space Invaders of African view. These are games that really do deal with legitimate difficult questions, that deal with adult themes, drug use, violence, sexual sex, and horror, all these other issues which deserve to be told in an interactive medium. That there are people like Ethan who are trying to tell these stories, independent designers, mainstream designers, trying to tell these stories and are limited by politicians' views of what games should be. And I think this is the real fundamental disconnect between what we, all of us here, can see as the potential for the future of computer games as an expressive medium, an expressive art form, and the view of computer games in state and federal legislations. So, having said that, let's talk really quickly about the history. We've been having this discussion for about 15 years now. The National Classification Scheme was introduced in 1993, 1994, took effect in 95. At that stage, this issue was discussed by the Senate Standing Committee at the time. Sorry, I can't remember the committee's name, but this was the committee that Senator Brian Harradine was on, for example, as many of you know from Tasmania, responsible for a lot of the conservative forces in Australian federal politics in the late 90s. What we saw in this committee was a real demonizing of what games were. And it was really clear, if you go back and read this 93 committee report, that games don't have artistic and literary merits. Games don't have narrative. Games don't deal with any sort of physical theme. They're mindless games with no real value. And as such, it wasn't difficult for the committee then to say that we need to protect Australians from what we see as the disastrous consequences of game development in the future. And there was a lot of fear. The primary reason that we didn't introduce an R rating in 95 when we had the chance was that the Senate thought that parents didn't understand the medium enough to be able to make an informed decision for their children. They said, it's okay with videos, we're very profitable with videos and movies and books, that parents are able to look at these and decide what's suitable for their children to use. With games, you could see early 90s, there was a lot of confusion, no one really understood the technology, certainly not in federal politics. There was a lot of fear that parents wouldn't be able to make those decisions, that parents couldn't be trusted to make the decisions on behalf of their children. I think that's changed a lot, if it was ever true. I'm not sure it was ever true. But that's the basis on which we introduced the National Classification Code, which is where we're in the trouble now, because the way the National Classification Code is set up, it needs unanimous support from all the service centres, federal and state, in order to make any changes. So interestingly enough, after the Act took effect in 95, some people started asking questions about how we'd come to this conclusion that parents weren't able to look up to their kids. We had a national review in 1995. Surprisingly enough, it found that there was no justification, no empirical evidence that suggested that games contributed to aggressiveness or violence. That was fairly wholly ignored. We had a bigger review in 1997, which found also found no link to aggression, but found lots of positive effects of games. how they bring people together, how people are at this stage getting around and having families were starting to play games together. Obviously, it was building communities, getting people engaged. It has changed, and I think, I'm not sure it was ever true, but to an extent there was federal recognition. Games aren't just something that people who are teenagers play in their basements and before they go on rampage. There are real positive benefits to the expressive stories that involve the game. Again, nothing really happened at this stage. We had a huge review in 2002, another 5 years later. There were I think there were about 400 submissions to that review at that time, which again expressed views from all over the spectrum. Importantly, and what I think really telling about this debate is the results, the recommendations of the review suggested that the people who were making the arguments against an R18 rating were doing so from incorrect assumptions. They were doing so because they don't understand how games work. They were doing so because they don't understand how the classification scheme works. Again, 2002, the recommendation for that review was to introduce an R18 rating, 5 years after the 1970s. Here we are, 7 years after that, and we still don't have an R18 rating, precisely because of the way, as Ethan said, that it's been blocked at a state level by South Australian Attorney General Michael Atkinson. Apparently there are some other attorneys general, I'm not sure how that's going to play out, but what's happening at the moment is that there's a discussion paper. The Victorian Attorney General, Howell, has put his weight behind the drafting of another public consultation paper, which is going to bring these issues to the light again. As Ethan mentioned, we don't know where the discussion paper is. I've contacted the Commonwealth Minister for Home Affairs, Brendan O'Connor. I've encouraged other people to do that, and I encourage each of you here today to write to Brendan O'Connor and ask him where this discussion paper is. You can contact